Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much on behalf of Doctors for Life for extending your invitation to us to address you. We're aware that you had a very busy session yesterday and another busy session today, so it is our plan to keep our presentation quite streamlined, quite specific, and to be available subsequently to questions afterwards. I'll be accompanied on the podium afterwards by Dr. John Monaghan, an obstetrician. I'm a GP myself. Doctors for Life is an organisation for doctors who wish to uphold the practice of medicine as a service to human life at all stages. It began in 1992 and is open to medical practitioners of every specialty, both working and retired. That's the fetal heart at 6 weeks. It comes in on this slide. It's not an interference. It's actually the fetal heart. It aims to provide evidence-based and factual information to doctors and others concerned about the ethical questions related to patient care and practitioner responsibility at all stages of life. We represent general practitioners, psychiatrists, occupational health physicians, and others. My aim, first of all, is to explain, our basic premise in Doctors for Life. Irish healthcare has a long tradition of treating both patients in pregnancy, the expectant mother and her developing child. The position of our organisation has therefore always been that in pregnancy there are two patients, and with the exception of a medical emergency that threatens the life of the mother, there are no clinical reasons to put one life before the other. The practice of medicine is a service to human dignity, and doctors must adhere to the highest standards of professional competence in treating, protecting, and advocating for patients. The first principle of medical practice is, above all, to do no harm. And just to introduce this other patient, we have two very short videos on embryonic development at 12 weeks and at 20 weeks, which I hope I can get to play for you.
Between 11 and 12 weeks, fetal weight increases nearly 60%. 12 weeks marks the end of the first third or trimester of pregnancy.
It's 20 weeks.
By 20 weeks, the cochlea, which is the organ of hearing, has reached adult size within the fully developed inner ear. From now on, the fetus will respond to a growing range of sounds.
The current guide to professional conduct and ethics for registered medical practitioners, for doctors, states specifically, you have an ethical duty to make every reasonable effort to protect the life and health of pregnant women and their unborn babies. During pregnancy, rare complications can arise where a therapeutic intervention is required, which may result in there being little or no hope of the baby surviving. In these exceptional circumstances, it may be necessary to terminate the pregnancy to protect the life of the mother, while making every effort to preserve the life of the baby. Although the Medical Council acknowledges that in this jurisdiction, in Ireland, abortion is legally permissible where there is a real and substantial risk to the life of the woman, which cannot be prevented by other means, it warns doctors that this risk may not be immediate or inevitable in all cases. This should be assessed, says the Medical Council, in light of current evidence-based practice. There is therefore an obligation on doctors to ensure that as far as humanly possible and within the prevailing technical and clinical constraints, both lives are given the maximal chances of survival. This is standard obstetric practice and is fully supported by the Eighth Amendment. I would now like to pass on to the treatment of seriously ill children who are diagnosed before birth. In your study of the Eighth Amendment over the past several weeks, you will have heard the suggestion that the amendment places a restriction on parents who have been told that their baby will be born with a life-limiting illness and who wish to end the pregnancy for this reason, even though there is no question of the mother's life being at risk. This is true. Some parents receive the terrible news that the baby they are expecting is unlikely to survive for long after birth. The wish to escape this future and to avoid suffering either for themselves or for their child is understandable. In this situation, doctors are called upon to be compassionate with and supportive of parents who are both shocked and grieving, and to facilitate them in every way throughout the pregnancy. However, the doctor must also remember that the dying or disabled child in the womb is the same as the dying or disabled child outside the womb. There is no difference. The ethical responsibility to respect his or her life and to avoid intentionally harming them is still valid. Doctors for Life oppose the termination of pregnancy for reasons of terminal illness or disability diagnosed in the infant prior to birth, and we wholeheartedly support the provision of appropriate hospice care for children born with life-limiting illnesses and for their families. Children who are diagnosed in the womb with life-limiting conditions deserve the same care as other people who are terminally ill. We would like all sick babies to be nurtured, made comfortable, and allowed to experience the warmth of the love of other people before they die, because this is what true palliative care is about. I would now finally like to turn to the question of choice. The Eighth Amendment allows doctors to use all clinical means at their disposal to protect the lives of both mother and baby. It does not allow for personal choice to end the life of either. We in Doctors for Life do not think that the Eighth Amendment has failed. In fact, we think that it has been very successful in saving lives. The fact that so many of those in favour of repealing the Eighth have stated publicly that they see it as an obstacle to abortion on demand must mean that it is precisely that, and that its removal would lead inevitably, over time, to abortion on demand. What rights will the patient in the womb have then? You have generously set aside a lot of time for the Citizens' Assembly, and it is very much appreciated. Before you finally make up your minds on the question of the amendment, we would like to strongly encourage you to watch Sally Phillips' documentary, broadcast some months ago on BBC Two, entitled A World Without Downs. We suggest this not because the documentary refers mainly to Down syndrome, but because it raises questions about the consequences of free choice, which you as individuals have to answer to your own satisfaction as you make your decision. The members of the Citizens' Assembly may consider that they are only offering the Irish people a referendum on their own constitution, but at stake are the lives of other citizens whose rights will be set aside. Thank you very much.
Very good. Now I'll take the first question. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge. I'm the facilitator for Table 3, and a citizen at this table has asked me to direct a question to you, Dr. Halpenny. Many people who support choice in respect of access to abortion services have said they may never avail of an abortion themselves. So upon what evidence do you base your assertion that removal of the Eighth Amendment would lead to abortion on demand, or for other reasons than non-life-threatening reasons?
Our position is based on the reality in other jurisdictions where abortion was initially introduced legally for unrestrictive grounds, and gradually over time those grounds became wider and wider and wider. So our position is that if we remove the 8th Amendment, then we, in our Constitution, at least unless something else is put in its place, we have nothing to specifically protect the unborn child. And therefore, the unborn child is vulnerable. That's the position.
Thank you very much.
A member at this table has asked me to address the following question to Dr. Halpenny. You stated your mission as, quote, to above all do no harm, unquote. However, you then proceeded to say that expecting parents of children to be born with life-limiting illnesses are forced to go through with this suffering to term. Are these two views not in contradiction of each other?
There is the suffering of the parents. That is undeniable and excruciating both to the parents and also to the medical professionals involved with them. But as I said in my presentation, there is another life involved, and the doctor also has a duty to respect that life. And therefore, it is unfortunate a decision has to be made, but the doctor cannot directly, intentionally harm the life of the second patient in the womb.
Very good.
This is another question for Orla Halpenny. In cases where a mother's life is not at immediate risk, so perhaps during a prolonged miscarriage, similar to the Fetal Halpenny case, the prolonged miscarriage led to sepsis. Do you accept that waiting for an obvious threat to a mother's life can ultimately lead to death? And if so, can you perhaps enlighten us as to what point intervention should be considered by doctors to protect a woman's life?
May I pass that to the obstetrician on my right, Dr.
Oh,
Monaghan?
please, sorry. In fairness, I had both your names. Thanks.
Thank you. John Monaghan is my name. I'm an obstetrician. It's not possible to answer your question in a concrete fashion because the clinical problem that's in front of you can vary greatly. I mean, the Savita case is an example of one very difficult medical situation. I would suggest that the management, if you take that example of sepsis, is a matter of clinical judgment, which requires a very high level of medical competence. And that does not mean, you know, as was stated in that case, that you wait until the patient is so ill that you can't rescue it. In that particular situation would be known, I think, to every obstetrician. They would have experience of that. And it was a particularly unfortunate case. But I don't think it's a marker for how we should behave in every clinical situation. I don't know whether that's any good or not. Yeah.
We'll take another question, please. That's
good morning, Judge. I'm the facilitator at table 11, and one of the citizens has asked me to ask the following question to Dr. Halpenny. If abortion is allowed under more conditions in the future, and the guide to professional conduct and ethics for registered medical practitioners will be changed, would your group continue to adhere to the guide and law, whatever the doctor's personal choice?
Certainly, Doctors for Life will maintain the position of respect for life in the womb that we have now. I can't answer for other doctors. Our position is clear, and we would, in that event, I think, have recourse to conscientious objection.
And that, of course, is provided for in the 2013 Act. Yes, another question? Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, I'm a member on table 10. Sorry, a few of us had a question. I'd like to direct it to Professor John Monaghan, please. At what stage in the development of the fetus can brain function be detected, please?
I'm not a neurologist. I think brain function can be detected around 8 weeks pregnancy by very sophisticated equipment, on a research basis. As a clinician, you observe the effects of brain function on a scan from 6 weeks onwards in the spontaneous movements, and as time goes on, you get thumb sucking, hiccups, drinking. You see the attributes in the child which are clearly show that it's a human and that it's functioning in the way that a newborn baby or any other person will function with regard to nutrition or breathing or and so on. So perhaps I don't know if the question that you were hinting at would it be the question of fetal pain or when the fetus can feel pain? Is that what was in your mind?
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It's a very hotly debated subject. And many people who would have observed, say, ultrasound termination of pregnancies would have seen activity on the part of the baby which would suggest that it's feeling pain. Ultrasounds done during abortions. I think that the argument or the consensus might be around 18 to 22 weeks, something like that, in terms of the feeling pain the way that we would feel pain. But I can't be more specific than that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm assistant from Table 5. I just wanted to ask, from a clinical perspective, is it not to be considered that women and their families might be best served by making available safe abortion services in Ireland, with consideration for the fact that abortion is already happening here? We've heard that from several people. And what really seems to be in question is whether we'll allow it at home or continue to export our citizens to receive care elsewhere. Thank you.
I suppose maybe both sides might want to respond to that.
Would you like to go first?
Yeah,
Well,
Dr. Monaghan, yes, thank you.
As the person in the middle, I'll try. The position of Doctors for Life would be that, of course, the question of abortion has been happening in Ireland ever since abortion was legalised in the UK in the late 1960s. The question that the way that we would put it is that, to say that, well, let's open up that industry here does not itself answer the moral or ethical question that we are concerned with. And I suppose the question that we believe that the Assembly has to answer is that the Constitution has given rights to the unborn child, and whether those rights should be extinguished or not. And on that hangs the answer to your question. I think if you decide that the unborn child has no rights, then there isn't any difficulty with wherever jurisdiction it's done. If the child does have rights, then that must be taken into account in the decision making of, that we have this right, we've given this right to children in the womb, and whether that should be extinguished or maintained.